Hello, everybody! Welcome to another episode of Semi-tolerable ranting. I'm your host, Nate FT. On this episode of your new favorite show, Come Now Admit It, we are going to be talking about, yet again, nationalism. But this time specifically, why it is a bad thing.
Now, we need to talk beforehand about our driving question, and that, without further ado, is how can an understanding of nationalism in the past help us make sense of today? Apart from that, I will also be answering how I believe nationalism has been a negative thing throughout history. Germany had wanted to unite for time immemorial. In some ways it had, yet not completely, or in the way that the German people wanted. The Holy Roman Empire, which really just had a German peasant class with the aristocrats being German but at the same time completely unlike their people, hadn't filled the void. The German Confederation never even had an actual central government, meaning it failed in this regard as well. All hope seemed lost. However, the two German states wished to unify the people, under their own terms, of course. The two powerful German states were Prussia, a kingdom new on the world stage that invested heavily on the military, and Austria, an empire that had been the unchallenged dominating force in Germany for a while, until now. First, Prussia and Austria took land from Denmark, and then turned on each other. Prussia won, and continued to go ahead and create the North German Confederation. Naturally, this was not enough. The French held some land that the Prussians believed belonged to a united Germany, and they also opposed German unification, so war was inevitable. Long story short, Prussia won the war, and Germany... Of course, this isn't some fairy tale. Germany lost a war, then became a horrible dictatorship feeding on the nationalistic sense left by the German Empire to kill millions of innocents just because they were Jewish or for many other unjust reasons, and the government got away with doing so in that they kept the support of their people throughout it. After losing another war, they became a pawn divided in two by countries once far weaker than them. To this day, they have still not recovered to what they could have been, and this was all caused by nationalism. Today, Germans don't have their old imperial ambitions, but this is just an example of how one of the world's premier powers became another piece on the chessboard. Naturally, I don't quite expect you to understand why nationalism is a horrible thing from just that. You need more evidence, of course, and more evidence you shall have. Russia had what seemed like destiny on its side. The country as a whole had a massive population, great military power, and seemingly unlimited potential. It hadn't reached the number one spot yet, but it seemed all but inevitable. Russia at the time was like the China of today in that regard. Naturally, this fact got the attention of some of the other great powers, and not the good kind. Many wars had been fought between Russia and the Ottoman Empire, and Russia had won nearly all of them. Once again, Russia started threatening the equivalent of modern-day Turkey and seemed poised to win. The religious differences between the two powers were at their height, but the Ottomans had a trick up their sleeve, and that was support from Britain and France. The Crimean War, as it was called, was fought mostly in the Black Sea, and while Russia put up as good of a fight as it could, it was no match for the coalition against it. Russia spiraled into war and revolution following this war and two others, and ended up under an authoritarian government that posed as communists and socialists to gain the support of the people, then betrayed them for their own power and wealth. After the collapse of this despicable regime, Russia had lost everything, and no longer had its former power or even a bright future in sight. The nationalism born from Russia's military defeats isolated Russia from the world, and left it to slowly die. Still not convinced? Don't worry, there's more. I wouldn't leave you like this now, would I? Italy is wonderful. Beautiful place, really. Millennia of ancient history and a stunning natural environment. Oh, I'd love to go to Venice, but enough talking about my fantasies of visiting Europe. We need to talk about this questionable past that Italy has. As it was in Germany, Italy was split into multiple smaller states, all independent. Italian unification came from the ambitious policies of the Kingdom of Sardinia, which caused the island nation to start to swallow up its neighbors in northern Italy, the richer area, one by one. Eventually it came down to northern Italy, controlled by the Kingdom of Sardinia, versus southern Italy, controlled by the Kingdom of Two Sicilies. It was hard fought, but under Sardinia, Italy was unified for the first time in over 1,000 years. Unfortunately, the troubles of Italy weren't over. It was still a pushover compared to some of the other countries in Europe, yet powerful enough to be forced into picking a side. It sided with Germany and Austria, then betrayed them, then fell into a fascist dictatorship similar to what happened in Germany later. While not as racist, it was still a horrible oppressive system. After defeating the Second World War, Italy was forced into the role of a puppet, just as was the case with Germany. It seemed the glory days of the Roman Empire were simply out of reach, and to this day, nationalism has fostered distrust between northern and southern Italy. 3 strong examples. If that doesn't convince you that nationalism is a bad thing, nothing will. As for the driving question, this tells us that nationalism in the past has proven that too much pride and love for your nation can easily result in the death of many innocents via oppressive regimes. It helps us understand the horrors we may be moving towards. We can work together and stop this. Divided, we are weak. But together, as a united human race, we are stronger than any force this world could possibly comprehend.
Well, that just about covers everything. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Semi-tolerable ranting. And do let me know if you want to see more. I'm morbidly curious. Goodbye.